Hey, welcome back. This is a follow-up video for our nut and bolt. We started out with one model, created a nut and bolt in two bodies, and then we ended up saving those two bodies out separately. Got to make sure that your folders are where you want them when you get ready to do these savings. If you haven't done this portion of it, I can put the link down in the description and you can follow along in the link, and you can actually make this nut and bolt and then come back in and do the assemblies. So under assembly here, we're going to use a standard mate, an advanced mate, and then a mechanical mate in this. So let's go ahead and get started with our mates. If you don't have your parts made, let's go ahead and get you started with the link that's down in the description and get those two made, and then come back to this video. So we want to create a new assembly. So new, make sure that you have assembly selected, and then OK. I don't really have any parts that are out here, so we want to browse for a part. I'm going to select the bolt itself. I can place it anywhere in the graphics area, and it's going to be a fixed part since it was the first one that we brought in. But just for these purposes, what I want to do is I actually just want to select this green accept mark or the OK mark, and then watch what happens to our model. It's going to move our model down into the same location that our origin was, where we actually modeled the part originally. So if I open this tree up for this bolt, notice it has an F over here, and that means that this part's fixed. It's fixed into space, so it has all 6 degrees of freedom constrained. Now the front plane of the assembly and the front plane of our part, they both are the same plane. So one good thing about this is if you go back in and change some things, it's going to stay on the orientation and everything. That's generally the way that I like to start my models. I like to start with whatever I want to be fixed, and then anything that may move later on, I want to associate everything to that one particular fixed part. Alright, so we've got the bolt in there. Now we want to insert the nut itself. So we go Insert Component. I can browse for the component. Hopefully it's in the same folder. I named it nut in the other part file. Now I could use the green check, and it's going to place it where I model it, but I don't really want to do that because I want this thing to move, and I want to add some mates to it. So we're going to force it to a mating mode where we have to tell it what we want it to do. So I'm just going to place it over here kind of close to the right hand side of our part, and then I placed it out here, and I didn't have to hit the green check or anything to accept it. So now this thing's free to float anywhere, but this bolt is fixed and it can't move. So what I need to do is figure out how we want this nut to be associated with that. So let's come up to the mate command with a little paper clip. Select the mate command, and here are all of our options that are available to us as far as the standard mates. I'm pretty sure that I'm going to want to use a concentric mate, but I'm not going to select it because this thing is our software is pretty intuitive, and it kind of thinks for us. If we pick two round surfaces, it thinks that it wants those to have the same center. So I'm going to zoom in. The way that we modeled this was there's actually a flat surface that's still remaining inside of our threads. So I picked that, and it thinks that that's just a continuous cylinder through there, even though it's got these grooves cut in it. Now the next face that I want is like this round cylindrical face on the bolt. And notice it moves it over, and then we have this little flyout. It automatically defaulted to concentric, and that is what I want. So I'm going to go ahead. I don't want to lock the rotation because I want to make sure that this thing can actually turn around or rotate around and then move up and down the thread. So we want to accept that mate. Now, as we look over here, existing mates for what we're doing is we have a concentric mate, but this bolt will actually move up and down. Okay, so I want to just place it right in there. I'm still in the mating command, but now what I want to do is I want to drop these double chevrons down to where I can see what's underneath here. I want a distance mate, but I don't want it to be just a one distance. So if I select this distance mate under advanced mates, notice it has 1 inch, 1 inch, and 1 inch. I can do angular mate as well, but right now we don't want to be concerned with it. So the 1 inch is where it's going to position the part. this next one down here is going to be the maximum value. That's how far it can move in between the two items that we select. And this is going to be our minimum value of between the two items that we select. Done this a time or two, so I'm going to make this 2.75 on my maximum, and then on my minimum I want to make it about 0.6. Alright, so these are our parameters that we want to apply this mate in here, or values that we want to apply. This is going to be where you really need to pick, and we want to watch what happens to the nut when we select both items. So the distance between, that's going to be a flat surface that's on top of the nut just by the way that we modeled it. Then I'm going to rotate it around, and there's also a flat surface on the bottom of the hex. So I select it. Now it moved the nut up 1 inch from that surface to this surface. But it tells us that we have 2.75 as a max and 0.6 as a minimum. But I haven't fully accepted this mate yet because it's not in our existing mates. So I'm going to hit the green check one time, and now we have our limit distance on here. So what I can do is I can come over here and check to see if we kind of like what's going on. So I can drag this thing up and down. Pretty happy with the distances that we have here. So I'm just going to leave it down like this. Now we want to make this thing where it acts like it would in real life, but not exactly like it does in real life, because this is more of a visual thing than anything else, and we're just kind of showing you how the mates work. So under mechanical mates, we're going to drop those double chevrons down, and we want to make it work like a screw, so we're going to use a screw mate. Alright, so I think I want this thing to rotate about 1/4 inch or 0.2 every time that we rotate. And now I have to pick what selections that we want, and it's the same thing as our concentric mate that we first started out with. So I'm going to come in and I'm going to pick that flat cylinder, well not flat, but that cylindrical surface. And then the next mate the next item that I'm going to want is the bolt itself. And this is my arrow, so it says that I'm going to go counterclockwise. So that would be like we're turning this bolt. So the nut would be rotating counterclockwise, and we would be tightening this thing up. Alright, so let's accept this. So we now have 3 mates that are available to us. Now I want to rotate this nut around. Notice how it's climbing up the screw, the bolt. I'm going to drag it down all the way to the bottom until it stops, and I'm going to accept it. Now notice it's kind of positioned way down here where we want it. It's just in the orientation that we placed it out here, but I've got this little red light, green light over here on our mates, and I want to rebuild that. So what it's doing is going through and calculating everything again, making sure that we're all up to speed. But I want to show this thing move, so we're going to create a motion study. So down along the bottom of our modeling or graphic space, we want to come to select motion study. It should open up this little window down here. We want to add a motor. So what it's going to do is going to put a motor on this little hex nut down here. It says the component that we want to move is this one. I want to select that same cylindrical face. Now my arrow is pointing the wrong way, so it's like it's going to go the opposite direction. So I want to come over here and I want to reverse the direction. I can pick the little arrow over here, or I can pick it over in the tree. Now I'm going the direction that I want to, and now we need to have it, what do we want it rotated relative to? So that's going to be the bolt itself. So I move my selection window down here. We know that by its turn bit blue. I come and I pick the bolt, and now the number of RPMs, 100 RPMs is pretty tough on your graphics card for this thing to really keep up with. So let's just make that say 15 RPMs, and then we want to accept it. Now it's come down and it's calculated a movie for us basically. So I'm going to take this little diamond. So this tells us how long our movie is going to be. Instead of it being 5 seconds, I want to move it out to about 8. So I move it out to 8. It's got everything in there. Over here on this left hand side, it's got calculates the motion study. Let's go ahead and select that. And then the hex nut is moving up the shaft of the bolt itself. Now I had mine selected on playback or reciprocate, so this thing will move back and forth. So if you want it to go back and forth, you can select that, or if you want it to stop on just playback normal, it'll go to the end of it and then stop. And then you can play it from the start again, and it's going to move it way down here and then get it going. So alright, if you're happy with that, go ahead and save what you have, and then you can submit that in your learning management system.